Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch, and welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today we're going to look at creating or recreating basically pixel art styles using Blender. Now, of course, this is not technically pixel art. Gotta put this disclaimer out there, because pixel art is generally drawn one pixel at a time, very specific style. What we are doing is emulating that style. So basically, we're creating pixel art style sprites using Blender. This is going to use a lot of different technologies in Blender. We're going to be using the Cycles renderer. We're going to be using Vertex Paint, which I covered just recently. We are going to be using FreeStyle for that hand-drawn look. We are going to be using Toon shader and a couple other technologies. So we're going to kind of dive deep into Blender, but fortunately this will be pretty quick because this is the kind of technology you can use to create a hand-drawn-ish look very, very quickly. So if art isn't your forte, you can actually create some fairly good-looking results very quickly using Blender. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, if you prefer, I've already actually done a text-based version of this tutorial. This is ultimately the end result that we were going for, something like this. Or that is the game sprite we are going to be creating here. It's inspired by the retro game Zaxxon. We're going to kind of go ahead and try and create something somewhat like this. Now I'm going to be doing this very quickly, so we're not going to have exactly that quality, but we're going to try and come somewhat close. So first thing first, here's standard Blender scene. I'm not going to explain the modeling part of things. I have done full tutorial series on how to use Blender in the past, so if you need the specifics of how to model, etc., I already have series to get you going. I do assume some basic knowledge at this point. We're more about the rendering in this example. So there is our shape. Let's grab off those vertices and delete them. Get the back faces here, delete them as well. Alright, so we have our half a box to work with. We want that because we're basically going to be making a symmetric model here, so it's a lot easier just to work with a mirror modifier, which is exactly what we're going to apply here, like so. Perfect. So now we're back to a cube, but we can now work on one half of it and it will automatically be duplicated on the other half. So now let's take this guy, we're going to scale it down a little bit, like so. We're going to scale it along the x-axis a little bit, like so. Alright, perfect. So this is the core of our spaceship, per se. Let's move it back a little bit. Switch into edit mode, face mode, and we'll just extrude you out a little bit. So there is the fuselage, for example. And then we're coming up on the cockpit. Scale that down a little bit along the z-axis, like that. Extrude it out a little bit more. Scale down the z-axis again, like so. And we'll extrude it one more time. And scale the z-axis one more time, like so. So there is the outer hull of our spaceship. Now what I'm going to do is basically taper it a little bit. So we're just going to bring each of these in a bit. So we have a lovely, lovely profile of a spaceship going on. So let's go to the top view for a second and turn off that. All right, so you, and then you, and then you. And one more. Alright, so there is our very boring spaceship. It's way too fat. So let's give it a little bit of a diet. I'll just move these guys up slightly. And move them down slightly. Alright, so there's our basic profile of a spaceship. Now we need to add a couple of details here and there. I'm going to want to add a cockpit area, so I'm just going to come up here, do a bit of a loop cut here, a bit of a loop cut here. We're going to add our wings, so we're going to do a loop cut here. We're actually going to do two loop cuts, so I'm going to scroll wheel up before committing, like so. And I want those a little bit closer together, so scale Z, and then we'll just pinch them in like so. I don't want the wing to go all the way to the back, so let's do yet another loop cut here. And finally, I'm going to want a tail. So another loop cut at the top here. And yeah, I think that's good. All right, so here's the basic outline of our ship. Now we've got our wing here, so let's switch to face mode, and we'll extrude that out. We'll scale that along the y-axis, like so. And we'll move that along the y-axis, like so. And let's scale it down a little bit. Alright, so there's your basic wing on one end. Now there's our tail. We'll do the same thing. Extrude that up. Scale that X a little bit to taper it in. Oops, we don't want to do that. We want it to stay. Alright, I'll do that with a move. All right. Yep. So extrude that guy in. I'll switch to edge mode. Grab that face there. All right. I think I still moved it off. No, I think we're good. All right. So there is our, not rudder. The word is not coming to me. All right, so the final thing I want to do is just go ahead and pop our cockpit up a little bit here. Let me just do one more loop cut. All right, and face mode right here. So we'll call this whole thing cockpit. We'll have a big cockpit on this guy. So extrude. Extrude Z-axis, can find that. All right, and sweep that back like so. Switch to edge mode. Grab the wrong edge. Come on, YouTube. And zoom forward a little bit and down. All right, it's not the finest work you've ever seen in the world, but it is the gist of a spaceship. And you know, you could spend plenty of time making this look just a little bit better, but I'm not going to get into too much detail. The modeling is not the important part of this actual process. But there is a spaceship. Very poor spaceship, but it's a spaceship nonetheless. If I go to the front view, I think our geometry is, oh, I screwed the geometry up. Damn it. Let me just undo the cockpit to the point where I didn't do that. All right, you know what? That's good enough for me for now. All right, so there is our spaceship. Nothing really magic going on. Now what we're going to do is actually go ahead and start coloring and texturing this guy so that we can, you know, make it look like a sprite. And in order to do this, we're going to go back again to Vertex Painting. Now we're going to start off using the built-in Blender renderer, so the standard default, because it looks better in the default viewport. Working with Cycles Renderer, Vertex Painting doesn't seem to work that great. So go over to the material on this guy. So switch out of edit mode, material, and just turn Vertex Color Paint on. So now we can actually paint the vertices that we want. And again, we're going to go for somewhat of this color scheme. So your primary there is a bit of a red. And we've got a purple tail, yellow wings, and a green cockpit. Don't ask me why, but those were the colors they went with. So first things first, we got to make this guy pretty much red. So go back into edit mode, select every face. So we're going to basically do a complete fill of this guy with one color. And I'm going to go over here to Vertex Paint mode, like so. And there is a button down here, very important. And it says face selection masking for painting. And basically what this says is the faces that you selected in edit mode are the selection mask for here. So now if I paint, I can only paint in those particular areas. But we're going to do actually a big time saver. Is what we're doing is basically bucket fill, like if you were using any kind of standard paint program. And just do a Shift K and it fills the entire selection with that color. So we just put our base layer of color on. We now have a red spaceship. A very tacky red spaceship. Now we want to do things like bring in the color. So we're going to fill in our cockpit to be a different color. So we're just going to switch back to edit mode, like so. Select no faces, and here we'll do a circle select on this one, and then start your cockpit area. And again, click to commit, and back to the Vertex Paint. And now what we want to do is select the color for that, and then paint, like so. And again, we're going to try and keep this color somewhat consistent. So we've got yellow wings and that color there. So yellow wings, switch on back to our edit mode. Grab our wing. All right, I think that's everything. All right, so our wing is selected and just our wing. And again, back over, Vertex Paint, and we want yellow. so. And then again, Shift K. Now, of course, you could freehand paint this all you wanted, or you could add a whole lot more detail if you wanted to. We're going to try and just keep this guy kind of quick. And here, let's add a yellow highlight. So let's go on back to edit mode. We'll add some faces so we can actually follow them. And I'm just going to add a go fast stripe here of a different yellow. So face, click, 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 like so. And back to Vertex Paint. We will make you a slightly different yellow. And paint. Alright, so there we have our lovely game sprite. Beautiful, isn't it? But it was quick. You know, no matter how you look at it, it was definitely quick. Now let's switch over to see our camera mode. Yeah, that's not a bad shot. And let's go ahead and render that. So, yeah. It's not the best looking thing you've ever seen, but let's work on that. So now what we're going to do is give it a bit of a hand-drawn style. And that's where FreeStyle comes in. Now FreeStyle is a very cool feature. Basically it's a line render or non-photographic line render for Blender. It's very easy to use. We just kind of come over here to the rendering setting, scroll on down and turn FreeStyle on. And you'll immediately see the results. Boom. So you got the line outline, makes it look a little bit more hand-drawn, kind of, you know, like we actually drew this ourselves. Now let's go in and change the stroke style so we can actually add the thickness a little bit to our edge lines. Go ahead and boom. So there you go. Now one thing I'm going to do here to show you sort of some contrast, say we wanted to go around the edge of this cockpit. So we go back to, come on, preview. I'm going to grab my cockpit again. Edit mode. So I go all the way back with my, I think that's my cockpit. All right. And we'll head on back to Vertex Paint. And I'm going to make that just slightly lighter in color. Again, Shift K to apply. And then let's do our renderer. And what I'm going to show you there is, you notice how there's no, a lot of times you might want to actually render that line right there. So if you want to have a little bit more control over the lines that it picked, you know, get your hand-drawn style actually matching what you want, well, we have that option now, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go back here into edit mode. And what I wanted to do is have the line basically go down here and draw that line as well. I'm going to do it all the way around the edge of this guy. So switch into, edit mode. And I'm going to do tab. I want edges. I just want to, oops, not you. You. So basically, we're just grabbing the outline. And this is a line I want to basically have traced. You and you. So the outline, I just want to have FreeStyle actually go ahead and draw that line. So in order to do this, I now go Control E for the edges menu, and you'll see here we got Mark FreeStyle Edge. Now we'll go ahead and mark it like that. And now, I always lose this part, I think it's under Render Layers. Yep, so you go over here to Render Layers over this side, and you'll see down here we now have FreeStyle settings, so FreeStyle Line Set. Let me just expand these options out a little bit. And what we want to do is turn face marks on and edge marks on. Edge mark is the important guy. And now I'll go ahead and render it. Oops. Face marks was a mistake. Edge marks on. So now you'll see, boom, I drew that additional line. So if you need to draw, if you want to tell FreeStyle, you know, where to draw each of these particular lines, it can be done that way. Just mark the edges out, turn edge marks on inside of the renderer, and you're good to go. You can also have control over how it generates these guys. You can control the way that the FreeStyle lines actually look. You can change the color of them. So if we prefer to have a slightly less black approach, we can go with a bit of a lighter gray. It can easily be controlled over here. So you've got a lot of control over how your lines are actually rendered and drawn. So we're going to go back to a mostly black here. You can change the stroke style, so we can change it to more of a sketchy style. Like so, and it's a matter of just playing around until you get the end result you want. Now the nice thing is with this particular approach to drawing sprite-ish graphics is you can really kind of bring lighting into the scene. I'm going to create the simplest lighting rig you've ever seen, but it will have a direct result right away. So I'm going to go here to the top view, get out of edit mode, and I'm going to go ahead and 3D view, object mode. I'm going to add the simplest lighting rig you've ever seen, well, beyond the default. So first off, let's get rid of the starting light, and we're going to add hemispherical light, like so. All right, so we're going to rotate that Y 90. Okay, rotate that Y 180, like so. So we have hemispherical light, lighting it pretty uniformly from one direction. Do it somewhat more centered. And we'll do a shift duplicate, rotate Y 180, grab X, and we'll just bring that over here. So now we've got it lit from both sides pretty evenly. So the lighting effect you're going to get is now going to influence the scene a lot more. So if you wanted to have a consistent lighting rig for all of your sprites, you can create the light rig and then import your model into it. So all of your sprites will ultimately be lit the same way. And you can see the direct result on it. Okay, so now that we've actually gone ahead and created a textured model, colored it using Vertex Painting, which is nice because then we didn't have to do any texture unwrapping or anything like that. Now let's get into Toon shading. Now in order to use the Toon shader, we actually have to leave behind the Blender renderer. And the reason why I've been using the Blender renderer until this point is because it works well with Vertex Painting, and the preview and the colors are nicely viewed while you're editing. But once you're done, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. So we're going to switch over to Cycles renderer. To do so, just simply drop down here. Done. So we're now in Cycles, and you'll notice even if I go into material mode, we're not going to get our vertex results, which is unfortunate. That's one of the big downsides here. But we're now in Cycles mode, and we can apply a Toon shader to our object. So select our object, go to the material for it, and what we want to do is click Use Nodes. Now, Use Nodes basically allows us to create a node graph or a shader graph for this particular guy. And instead of diffuse, we just want to go ahead and select Toon. Now, you can play around with Toon a bit. You've got an option between diffuse and glossy. They'll give you different results. I leave this to you to play with at your own accord. But when we go ahead and render this, you're going to be a little disappointed with the results. That's not what we want. Now, the problem here is we are now dealing with a shader graph, and it has no idea to use the vertex colors, the Vertex Painting. So we have to go ahead and work on that. We come in here, bring up a new window, and we want to bring up the node editor. Remember when we clicked Use Nodes earlier? Well, that's what we did. We basically created this shader graph, which basically just says Toon shader is the output for this particular surface. Well, we want to do a little bit more than that. We actually want to go ahead and add an input here. So add input attribute, like so. All right. And now what this is going to do is allow us to bring in the color from our Vertex Painting. So we're just going to link up the color channel. Obviously, we're not quite there yet. And we're going to give the attribute a name of color. And now, if I go ahead and render it, things look a whole lot better. Now, you'll notice there's a whole lot of dots going on here. And this is because of the way that the Cycles renderer works. We're in a preview mode, and if you don't give it enough rays, you get this surface scattering. It's a downside of actually working with Cycles as opposed to the built-in scanline renderer. And we'll look at how you get around this when you're not doing quickie previews. So don't worry, we'll get rid of those dots. But you might be wondering, let me go back to node for a second. Where did this value cull come from? Well, if I go over here to the mesh data, just this guy, this triangle here, you'll see the vertex colors created a parameter called cull for color. That's really all we've done. It's basically said, take that data from that particular channel, the vertex colors data named cull, and pass that in as the color parameter for our Toon shader. So, yeah, we're one step closer, looking a little bit more hand-drawn, looking a little bit better. That scattering looks awful, but it does look something like, something you've done with marker work. So let's continue on from. Now, what happens if I want to have it to be a little bit more pixelated? Well, this can be done after the fact. So this is your render result. This is the result that the render spits out. This is basically the end image result. Well, the cool thing is there's also something built into Blender called a compositor. Now, a compositor is sort of like a special effects image manipulation pass that can be done after the rendering stage. You can use it for doing things like lens flares and that kind of stuff, or to mix and composite multiple things together. But what we're going to use it for is to pixelate it. To give us that pixelated look. It's still done in the node editor. So here we are in the node editor, but you'll notice down here under the buttons, we're right now in this mode, shader. And we want to switch from shader node to this one, which is compositing. So now we are in compositing, which is very cool. It's where we want to be. Now you'll notice down here, go into your render settings and also make sure that under post-processing that compositing is in fact turned on. By default, it should be, but you are going to want to verify that it is actually there. All right, so we're back to, so we got compositing, and the next thing we need to do is click Use Nodes. So this gives us our compositing graph. And let's move that up a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and split this guy down, get an image viewer up here so it doesn't keep overwriting the one we were working on. So here we go. All right, so there is our render result. There is our scene that we're working with. And here is our compositing. Now our compositing, let me just scroll this and zoom this in for a bit so you can see. So compositing is a very simple process. Basically, here is the render result as an image that's coming out this way, and it is going into a composite tag. Now what we want to do is very simple. We're going to scale this image down to a fraction of its size. We're going to pixelate it, and then we're going to scale it back up. So this is done by, first off, we grab that line, and oops, come on, unhook that. I'm going to need a little bit more room. So basically, you can think of this one as input, this one as your final output. Now what I want to do is add a couple of nodes here. So add, okay, so I need to add a math node. So is it vector? No, it's, sorry, I just got to find scaling. Scale. All right, so we're scaling relative. So we take our image input, bring that in like so, and we are going to scale it down to 20% on this example. So, and then ultimately we're going to be duplicating this guy, and we're going to undo that 20%, so 5 times bigger, and then this guy is going to connect here. So there's a break here, so obviously our end result is not looking too great because we haven't actually done what we want to. It's not a complete chain through this shader graph. So what we need to do is go ahead and add, and I think it's a distort. No, it's not. All right, where did you go? Filter. And pixelate. All right, so there's our source in, source out. There we go. And there is your pixel art style rendering done. And that's really kind of it. We can go ahead and do a quick render on that. So it runs through, then it pixelates it, and it gives you a bit of that pixel art look. Now remember, like this is not looking good. This and this was well before. So if I turn this guy off completely, we're not going to show it easily. This was, being calculated as part of the render, and I said I'd come back and cover that. Well, that's actually being done over here. So we go into our render settings and sampling. This is the number of the amount of detail used in the render. So we're going to switch this instead to final rendering. And this will use a whole lot more rays as part of the cycle renderer, but what you'll notice is it also takes a whole lot more time. But you're getting smoother gradation, so you're not getting those, really rapidly drawn dots from the lack of detail that it had when the cycles renderer was calculating things. Instead, it's a much smoother result. And as you can see here, it does take substantially longer when you jack that up, because this jacked the samples up to 24 as opposed to, I think it was 10 beforehand. But you do get much better results. So it just finished rendering. It's about to ship it to the compositor. Actually, no, FreeStyles is next. So it's going to do the line rendering around it, which we should see any second now. There we go. And then it's passed through. So there you go. There is our pixel art style jet plane drawn in pretty short period of time. It doesn't look the greatest, but then again, this is one of those things you could have created in 4 minutes, but it does look pretty solid. And the cool thing here, and I'm going to go back to our, we'll go back to preview, so we've got, this will be a lot faster for us. The nice thing now is we can easily, and we don't really need that preview window anymore, now animate this guy however we want and easily animate it out to a video. So for example, let's say we needed to do a barrel roll. We'll just start from scratch. So rotate Y 90 degrees. Actually, rotate Y minus 180. Yeah, that'll work. Bring up the timeline. So here's where not doing it by hand is a huge boon to you. So I'm going to go in here and do a rotation key on here. Move forward 20 frames. Rotate 90 degrees. Oops. Undo you. Rotate Y 90 degrees. Set rotation scale. Forward there. Rotate Y 90 degrees. And rotation scale there. Let's make our animation a total of 40 in length. And play. So there we've got our different frames of animation, and we could just as easily come in here to our renderer, and you would do this as frames, but what I'm going to do this is as a single image. So go ahead and create an AVI, not an AVI, JPEG here. Roll animation, render our animation like so. And here's where the multiple frames really shines. I'm not going to make you watch each of these particular frames rendering out, because as you can see, it's still going to take a few seconds even under preview resolution, but I will pause this and be right back. And after some time, our rendering is complete, and here is the end result. So you can actually get some pretty remarkable results in a very short period of time, especially again if you are artistically challenged. Here you're not having to deal with texture mapping, you're not having to deal with emulating the lighting conditions in a hand-drawn sprite, which is where a lot of sprites start actually looking really bad, to be honest. This does it pretty consistently, handles it for you. You can easily snap your model from multiple directions. So if you want to have 8-way movement or 16-way movement, you want to switch from isographic to orthographic, you name it, you can. So it's a powerful technique. Now, of course, it is not 8-bit graphic, or it's not brain work for me. It's not bitmap art per se. Well, it is a bitmap, any rastered image when you're out at the end. But, some purists are going to say, well, this isn't what that is. And you know what? This is a technique. This is a tool you can put in your toolbox. If you choose to use it, it's up to you. If you like this art style, it is completely up to you. I just thought I would show you the process here. Let's do a quick recap of exactly what we covered. So first off, you saw me slowly model a very ugly model. Very simple, though. And the cool thing here is you can use a relatively simple number of polygons, and using the Vertex Paint mode, you don't have to get into texture mapping, you don't have to get into UV unwrapping, so you can actually create some very rapid results. Now, once you actually have a model that's colored and textured using, again, you go into Vertex Paint, Shift-K to fill in the area you want, or you can hand draw using the colors you want. Once you've got that done, you switch over into the Cycles Renderer mode, and then you can apply the FreeStyle, which gives you your outlines or your hand-drawn outline look there. We apply the Toon shader to our particular image, and then we come in and create our shader graph. Our shader graph, once again, looks like this. Very simple. All you have to do is add an additional input, which is the color data, again, which has come from here. That's the vertex color information. You pass that in as the color information to the particular Toon shader, and you can do a whole lot here. Like if we start switching around with the settings for this Toon shader, over here, there's a lot of things we can actually control. We could do all kinds of things with this actual shader graph here. Cycles is infinitely powerful. There are so many things we could do in here, but we're not going to cover that in any level today. But, if you wanted to tweak your results, you definitely could. So this will ultimately render, give you a pretty good look, but if you want to get that pixelated look, then you can go on, pass it off to the compositor. And again, all we're doing here is scaling it down to a very small image, pixelating that result, and then scaling it back up. And this is your end result, which you can see rendered over here, which once animated looks like this. So that is all we are going to cover today. Hopefully you did find that technique useful. Blender is an amazingly powerful tool. Definitely one of those things, and it's where I actually push people that have limited artistic ability, because if you use some of these tricks, you can get some pretty good looking results in a very pretty short period of time. Now, the learning curve for Blender is quite high, and then this brings a whole new realm. So now you gotta learn cycles, you gotta learn compositor, etc. But as you saw here, it's not that hard. Once you got the basics down, they translate across all the different parts of Blender. So it's a very uniform, consistent experience. So anyways, I hope you did like that. If you do, please, of course, do click like. We got all kinds of game dev related stuff here, and if you're interested in more tutorials, reviews, tips and tricks, you name it, please do click subscribe. Hopefully you'll find something interesting. All right, see you all later for now. Goodbye.